Hello, this is episode 31 of the Alfology2 podcast. So, hi. Look, wasn't so happy with the audio quality of last week, which is a shame because I did like the topic. If you haven't listened to last week, do go and catch up. It's about whether Jesus was transgender or not. Wasn't very happy about the audio quality. I'm still in the same room. I mentioned last week that I built a bit of a fort out of underwear and blankets and pillows and stuff. I have built a better fort this week. I am currently leaning forward and surrounded by soft items, and I have a blanket hanging up behind me. So I'm hoping that the sound quality will be a little bit better and there won't be so much echo this week, and I won't have to edit out so much echo in post-production, which gives it quite a robotic sound. Format of this week's episode is going to be slightly different to the usual. Normally, format is that I come up with a mental, off-the-wall, bizarre idea and try and sort of justify it. But I thought I'd have a break from that this week for no other reason that we're coming up to Christmas, and I'm going to try and pull some weird stuff out of my proverbial arsehole to tell you all. So this week we're actually going to have a bit of a historical podcast, a bit of a factual non-fiction one, which hopefully will give you the entertainment that you desire. So it all stems from the fact that the new James Bond film is out soon. They released the new trailer the other day. New James Bond film, the last one with Daniel Craig as James Bond, and basically my opinion is that James Bond these days is a bit shit. I didn't enjoy Skyfall as much as everybody else did. I'm just not a James Bond fan anymore. I used to like the silliness of Pierce Brosnan. I think it's all tried to be a little bit serious now, James Bond, and I like the old James Bonds as well because they were sort of used for their original purpose, which was a spy during the Cold War, which was how he was written. He was written as a British spy during the Cold War. And obviously spying and espionage was quite big during the Cold War. So he fitted in better. Than he doesn't really fit in. He's a bit of a bygone era character. So I'm pretty much done with James Bond, I think. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is two real life stories, pretty funky stories, like out there stuff, which you may or may not have heard of. I had never heard of them until I had heard of them, if that makes sense. Like they weren't in my general knowledge. I had to be specifically informed about these, so I'd imagine that a lot of people wouldn't know about these two particular instances of secret agents doing stuff. So I'm going to do that as a little connection to James Bond and his new film. Just by the way, before we get stuck in, I'd just like to say that I would really like to see a gay, black, trans woman James Bond, just to boil the piss of people who hate that sort of stuff. I think that would be really fucking funny. I would take genuine great pleasure in watching the heads of gammons explode because of a gay, black, trans James Bond. All right. Hope you like that idea too. So yeah, real life spies. Do they exist? Yeah, of course they exist. It's not a make believe thing. Countries carry out espionage all the time, and my country, Britain's as bad for that as anybody. The Americans have CIA as well. All over the world, this is happening. So the two stories that I'm going to tell you today aren't about the British Secret Service. I don't think that's particularly interesting. Or the American one. The first one's going to be about the French Secret Service, and the second one's going to be about the Russians or the KGB during the Cold War. So the first one, the French. I can't believe that people don't know about this. I was only told last week or the week before. It's absolutely fucking blown my mind that this happened in the modern era, but it did. Essentially, the French had secret agents infiltrate Greenpeace. You know Greenpeace, the environmental group, and they had them infiltrate them and put bombs on one of the Greenpeace's protest boats and blow it up. That happened. That's a thing. That's fucking mental, isn't it? That the French government sponsored a terrorist attack on Greenpeace. Like, how do people not know about that? Well, from what I understand, people in New Zealand know about it, but people elsewhere, not so much. Basically, what happened is New Zealand is pretty anti-nuclear. I think it's a completely nuclear-free zone, and France were doing some nuclear tests in the Pacific, like nuclear weapons tests, I think. And Greenpeace were using New Zealand as a base to go and protest these nuclear tests. So the French weren't very happy about that. They weren't very happy with the protests. What they were doing is they were putting individual protesters in dangerous areas so that the test couldn't be conducted. And France was sort of like, oh, for fuck's sake, we can't be having these troubles and Kiwis doing this. And essentially, a lot of these Greenpeace protesters were travelling on this boat called the Rainbow Warrior. Rainbow Warrior being a fucking badass name for essentially a battleship, isn't it? The HMS Rainbow Warrior is pretty fucking cool. So anyway, the French sent secret agents, like a whole team of them, to plan to bomb and sink this boat, the Rainbow Warrior. So they infiltrated Greenpeace. So they sent people undercover to pose as like Earth-loving hippies. They sent the bomb squads were there, like in disguise as tourists. They infiltrated the port at Auckland and were able to monitor comings and goings of the port. And essentially what happened is the agents planted bombs, or mines. They planted mines on the port of Auckland. Auckland's a fucking, it's a huge city. It's, the biggest city in New Zealand. And the French were fucking putting bombs in the port. 2 sets of bombs. One to go off and blow a hole in the ship, so to scare the shit out of everybody. Everyone gets off the boat. Then they detonate the second set of bombs a few minutes later and sink the boat. That was the plan. So they didn't plan to kill anyone. So look, that's essentially what happened. That the French committed a terrorist attack on New Zealand. They blew a hole in the boat. Everyone was evacuated, but then the boat wasn't really sinking. So they thought, oh shit, well, we've got time to go back to the boat. And, to get all our stuff off and to find out what's happened. So the crew get back on the boat, along with a photographer. And the photographer goes down into the bottom of the ship to get his camera kit back, because, if it sinks, he loses all that, he's going to be out of pocket, obviously. And, the crew are there inspecting the damage. Everyone's like, what the fuck is going on? Is there a huge hole in the side of the boat? It's pretty fucking scary stuff. And then the second bomb goes off. So the crew are like, holy fucking shit, and they, do the right thing and jump off. But the photographer, whose name is Fernando Pereira, is stuck in the bottom of the boat. And basically, he ends up getting submerged in water. He gets stuck, like in Titanic, when all the bottom decks get filled up with water, and they all get stuck. That's what happened to him, and the boat sinks, and he drowned and he died. That was the end of Fernando Pereira. He was a photographer. He was there sort of taking photos of the protest, and he was killed by French intelligence agents. So basically afterwards, France are like, oh, nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with us. We don't even have any agents in New Zealand. I don't know what you're talking about. But with the help of the local neighbourhood watch, which is pretty cool, it's very hot fuzz, isn't it? The Neighbourhood Watch Alliance coming in to help out. They were basically able to identify that the 2 agents were holed up in some place, and they arrested them and found all their documents, in their real documents and their fake documents, and basically said, all right, and then corresponded that with evidence from the scene. It's like, yeah, you were there, you're French agents. They were arrested, and they were eventually sentenced to prison for manslaughter. And they pleaded guilty because they did kill him, and they did kill him by accident, but definitely fucking criminally. They definitely criminally killed him, didn't they? They are criminals, those 2 agents, and so they were caught as part of this huge New Zealand police operation, and they were sent to prison for manslaughter. Speaking of manslaughter, I always found the spelling of it a little bit. It's a weird word, isn't it? Manslaughter. It's quite an aggressive term, isn't it? You slaughtered them. And the fact that like it has the word slaughter in it, would make you think that it means like deliberate. Like if you slaughter someone, the implication would be that that was a pretty fucking nasty way to kill them. But actually, manslaughter sort of means you kill them by accident. Also, it's spelt like man's laughter. There's a very, very big difference between manslaughter and manslaughter, isn't there? Anyway, that's a side point. Let's get back to it. There were loads of other agents involved, so the ones who infiltrated, the ones who were monitoring it from the harbour. So basically, they only got the bombers. So one of them essentially flees to Israel, right? And New Zealand puts in a extradition request to the Israeli government, and they go to capture this agent, but the agent's already been tipped off by this point, so they've buggered off over the border and back towards France. Other agents fled to Australia and were captured by Australian authorities with a view to extraditing them back to New Zealand. But under Australian law, they couldn't hold them under arrest for that length of time. So essentially, they had to let them go. And after they let them go, a French submarine came and picked them up and took them back to France, which is interesting behaviour for a country which is allegedly not guilty and is denying its own involvement in this. So what the French did in response to this is they set up their own inquiry, their own government inquiry. So the French government investigated themselves and decided that they did nothing wrong, which is classic, really, isn't it? Like that's very much akin to the Italian politicians changing the law in Italy to say that politicians can't be investigated for corruption. It's just fucking bullshit, isn't it? And then afterwards, New Zealand wasn't backing down, so they tried to bully them by saying that they were going to pull out of trade deals with New Zealand on behalf of the European Union, which would cripple New Zealand's economy. But look, New Zealand was having none of it. Eventually, the French government admitted that they did it, and it later came out that the president had authorised it personally. So obviously, Kiwis weren't very happy about this. Why would you be? It's pretty fucked up thing to happen on New Zealand soil. Your supposed allies doing terrorist attacks. And the Americans weren't in support of New Zealand either. They were in support of France. So New Zealand fell out with America over it. So all these countries started to gang up on New Zealand. And New Zealand basically just told the EU and the US to fuck off, and that they would make their own trade deals, which they've have. They had to restructure their entire foreign policy because the French are cunts. And who knew that the French would be cunts? Basically, just a big country bullying the small country, which happens quite a lot with these sort of big ex-empires. It does happen, doesn't it? They are a bunch of cunts. But afterwards, the New Zealand citizens started to take their own boats out to the nuclear testing zone to protest. So like Dunkirk, like normal boats and yachts would go out there with New Zealand citizens on to fulfill the role of the protest and to say to France, like, come on and fucking come and sink some more civilian ships, which obviously they didn't. And France agreed to pay compensation back to Greenpeace and New Zealand and to the family of the person who they killed. And the money that went to Greenpeace was enough. I think it was $8 million, roughly around that. And it was enough to pay for a new boat. So that's the first of our little secret agent stories. France did a bomb attack on New Zealand and Greenpeace with their secret agents, and it backfired. Bunch of cunts. So look, we'll move on. I can't believe that people didn't know that first story though. Like, it's crazy that isn't a world known story. That people don't know that as commonplace. I can't believe that one's new to me, and this one's new to people as well. Probably less new because it's in a film, and when things are in films, they get publicised, don't they? So this one's less new. But it's about the Russians and their spying on America during the Cold War. So it's called the hollow nickel case because it's a case about a hollow nickel. There was a nickel coin in America which was found to be hollow, and inside was a bunch of numbers. Basically, this kid, I think he was like a paper boy or something, ended up with this coin, and it just didn't feel right in his hand. It felt too light. Coins are quite dense, aren't they? They're quite solid. And he's like, this coin's too light. So what he does is he launches it at the floor, and instead of bouncing around like a normal coin would do, the coin splits in half. And all this paper comes out. The paper has like a load of numbers on it. So he hands it into the police, who hands it to the FBI, who hands it to the CIA, yada, yada, yada. And it's apparent that this is a piece of code. They don't know where it's from. It's just numbers, so they don't know where it's from or what sort of code it is. But all they know is that they can't break it. It's a super advanced Soviet code. It wasn't because they were shit. It was just that the code was so advanced, like that there's no way you could break it without some sort of prior knowledge of the system. So they failed. They spent years trying to break this code, and they were unable to. So it worked, didn't it? That's what codes are for. If you intercept it, the message isn't decipherable, and they couldn't decipher it, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so the trial goes cold, and there's this Russian agent, and I'm going to try and pronounce his name. It's Reino Heihaman, I think. That could be totally wrong. He's got all sorts of accents and stuff in his name. He was Finnish, I think. But he's a Russian agent. He's a Russian secret agent, and he turns up in Belgium one day at an airport and says, "I'd like to claim asylum in Belgium. I'm a Russian spy. I'm currently on my way back to the Soviet Union because I've been recalled, and I don't want to go back because I'm scared, and I'm willing to cooperate with the West." The reason why he did that is because he'd been sent back for being shit at his job, and essentially they were probably going to do some bad things to imprison him or kill him or gulag him. I don't know, but basically he was scared, and they didn't really believe him at first. But he started to describe, how the spy network over in America worked, and who he worked for, and how they did the codes, and how they transferred the information. And basically, this sort of corresponded with the information from the hollow nickel case. So the CIA are like, fucking hell, we want this guy. And it turns out that he was the original owner of the hollow nickel. And he'd sort of accidentally spent the nickel, and obviously once it's been spent, it's in circulation and it was not recoverable. And he was the original owner. So he worked for a guy called William Fisher. William Fisher was a British man of Russian descent who was in America on, I think, a Lithuanian American passport, under a false identity, and he was basically running a spy network to get atomic secrets back from America to Russia, so they'd know about America's nuclear program, so they could do their whole Cold War shebang. That was what he was doing. Whether he was successful or not is a very different story. And Heihaman was essentially his assistant, but Fisher thought that Heihaman was shit, like proper fucking shit. Something in the message in the hollow nickel coin is like, don't send messages that are too long. We've given you money. This is money for the operation. Don't spend it on personal stuff. Don't include your personal details. And Heihaman would end up doing all of this stuff. They gave him, I think it was either 3 or 30 grand, I can't remember. They gave him a lot of money in US dollars to help with the spy network operation. This is government Russian money. And he spent it on alcohol and hookers. Which obviously sent Fisher fucking up the wall. You'd be furious, wouldn't you? You're a spy, and your assistant spending all your money, all your big spy budget, on hookers. But, you gotta fucking respect Heihaman for that, wouldn't you? Lad just wants to have a good time. He wants to have a good time shagging prostitutes and getting pissed up, which is what he did with his spy money. And obviously he fucking spent the nickel as well. He spent the money which held the codes, which is what a fucking div. So anyway, Fisher goes back to the USSR for a holiday or for a debrief, for a catch up with his superiors, and he's like, "Oh, look, mate, this Heihaman bloke is fucking rubbish. You've got to get me a new assistant. He spent the money, he's lost the codes. I don't like working with him. He's basically he might as well be a traitor. He's that bad. We'd rather have a traitor. At least a traitor would, give off the aura of fucking competence. So yeah, he's fucking shit. Let's bin him off and get me a new one." For the USSR are like, yeah, all right. So yeah, we'll do that. So what they do is that they bring Heihaman back, but he realizes what's happening to him. He realizes that Fisher doesn't like him. He's not very popular with his boss, and he knows what's going to happen to him. So that's why he hands himself into the Belgians. Anyway, he then cooperates fully with the Americans, like you would if you had yourself in, and he's then like, oh yeah, so I know whose nickel that is. It's mine, but I know where it comes from, and I know who the network is. I know who the ringleader of the network is. So I will reveal him to you, and I will give evidence against him so that you can prosecute this spy. And the Americans are like, yeah, that would be really good, mate, if you could do that. So he does, and basically they end up arresting Fisher, his boss. So William Fisher gets arrested and gets tried and charged for treason, which is an interesting charge, actually, because he wasn't an American citizen. Anyway, he changes his name to Rudolph Abel. I don't know why he does that, but he does. That's what Fisher's name is now, but I'll continue to refer to him as Fisher just to make it nice and clear. And he gets a lawyer because the Americans were trying to like do quite a bit of a performance piece for the Russians to say, look at us, we're going to give your guy a fair trial. We're not just going to send him to a gulag or shoot him straight away. We're going to give him a fair trial in public because we're the land of the free and you're a bunch of dickheads. That's essentially what their reasoning was for giving him a lawyer. But the lawyer they gave him was an ex-CIA lawyer. Well, not CIA, it was the OSS, which was what the CIA was beforehand. And he worked for them as a lawyer during the Second World War, or just after the Second World War, to try the Nazi war criminals. So he's quite an experienced prosecutor, but now he was an insurance lawyer, into fender benders and insurance claims. But he was still a very competent lawyer, and basically this lawyer actually properly defended him. Took him all the way to the Supreme Court because they didn't have a search warrant. They had an arrest warrant for Fisher, but not a search warrant. And the search warrant is where they found all the evidence of him being a spy. So he actually had a decent case, but he lost anyway in Supreme Court. But what he did do in the initial sentencing hearing, when he... Look, so as you may have heard, there's been a bit of a cut there because fucking 3 fire engines just turned up outside and all firemen getting out with their helmets on and hoses and stuff. Although I've looked out the window, there doesn't actually appear to be a fire, so I don't really know what that was all about. But they've gone now, so we'll continue with the podcast. I just thought I'd let that little cut run on so you could hear the sirens and. This isn't the first thing that's gone wrong with this podcast, actually. I've already recorded this episode, but my microphone was fucked up and the sound was all off and wrong, and like someone had turned the gain up. It sounded like an electric guitar, my voice. So this is the second time I've recorded it anyway, and I've had to stop for fucking sirens. Oh, and the first time I recorded it as well, it fucking cut off halfway through. It's been a real fucking ball out recording this episode. But look, that's what you get with fucking low budget entertainment, isn't it? Anyway, I actually can't. Where was I? So during Fisher's initial sentencing hearing, James Donovan, his lawyer, was like, I'm gonna recommend that, because this is like a political case. Okay, yeah, it is a criminal case, but there's all sorts of politicians watching. Everybody around the world is watching to see what we do with this spy. And I'm going to say that we shouldn't kill him. And I'm saying it in open court. We shouldn't kill him, put him to death. Because what if the Russians capture an American spy? What do you think they're going to do to him if we've killed him? Let's save him and potentially... And the judge is like, yeah, mate, that's class. What an idea. So the judge gives him 30 years in prison instead of the electric chair, which... paved the way for what unfolded next. There was an American agent or an American pilot who was flying a spy plane over Russia, which was shot down. So he crashed, and he failed to kill himself as he crashed. His name was Francis Gary Powers, or Gary Francis Powers. I don't know. His last name was Powers. And they captured him, and they tortured him for information, all that sort of jazz. And Donovan, the lawyer who represented Fisher, was the only person who the Russians trusted because a few years earlier he'd done a good job with the defense of Fisher. So the Russians agreed to have him come over and negotiate. So he did. He negotiated for a straight swap between America's spy and Russia's spy. So each team gets their man back. And also there was an additional kid, a student who'd been arrested called Frederick Pryor. He was part of the swap deal as well. So America got two people back, a student and a spy. And the Russians got their spy back. And that then paved the way for that lawyer to then become a proper prisoner negotiator. And he negotiated the Bay of Pigs and loads of stuff after that. So he created his whole career. And Gary Powers, then became a journalist and was killed in a helicopter crash. Fucking bad luck, mate. 2 crashes ruined your life. And then, one ruins it, the other one ends it. And Frederick Pryor is now like a famous economist. So, there's a lot of stuff that came from basically some fucking kid finding a nickel and throwing it on the ground. It unleashed a whole web of spies in America. It forced the spy to turn on the Russians. The Americans then prosecuted but didn't execute one of the spies, which was lucky because they were then able to trade him for another spy. And Fisher, the spy who was released, he then became like a teacher. He went and lectured about what it's like to be a spy. So all's well that ends well, really. Apart from the fact he died of cancer in the end, but all's well that ends well, ultimately. So it's a pretty cool story, though, isn't it? The film that tells that story doesn't tell the exact story I've just told, but it tells a story about Fisher, or Rudolph Abel as he's called, and Donovan the lawyer. Is Bridge of Spies. It's got Tom Hanks and it's by Steven Spielberg. Very good film. Would recommend that you go and see it at your earliest convenience. It's been out for a couple of years. And look, that's it. That's all I got on Spies. So look, we've deviated from the normal format of the podcast, which has been interesting. But I still think this is a decent episode of podcastery. Really, I've quite enjoyed doing this one. Look, we're back next week, possibly with a Christmas episode. Possibly. We'll see how I feel, or if I have any inspired ideas in the meantime. If you enjoyed that, or if you enjoy the podcast generally, then keep listening to it. Tell your friends if you have any. If you don't, tell strangers. Thumbs up, 5 stars, subscribe, all that sort of jazz. Get in touch on social media if you really want. Just keep it going because it ain't going anywhere. So that'll be it. I will see you and talk to you next week. So thank you very much. Cheers.